Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Common Cause. It's our early morning, once a month check-in, and it certainly has been uh, a busy month. Um, so there is quite a bit to go over. Um, and are we ready to get started, Catherine? Should we
Yes,
plow ahead?
I would encourage people to put, where they're from into the chat so that we all have that. And then I'm going to throw into the chat the links so that as we're going through, there's some resources that are going to be shared so that you have that as well. But you'll also get a follow-up. And with that, if you're ready to go, let's do it.
Let's go. Yeah, we'll send a recording and slides and everything. Um, so today we are going to do a quick review of what happened with redistricting, go over some stuff about the election. Um, we're going to talk about Senate Bill 293 um, and some voting elections things, householder, and upcoming events. And as I said, we will have some opportunity to just chat. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Catherine.
I'm slower molasses this morning. One of the things that we talked about the last time we got together is that we were going to do these what's happening events around the state. And, it was really wonderful to go. We went to Bowling Green and we went to Dayton and we went to Kent. And it was a really good opportunity to dig into the maps and to think about, well, what could an actual public process look like? And what were the kinds of questions that people had about the maps? And one of the things that really struck me had to do with we all know, hey, if you move around this district or you play around with that district, that in fact that type of manipulation completely changes the voting. But there is something really different about actually getting in and thinking about, okay, well, how do they do the dirty behind the scenes and how does this actually work? And I was just really glad to get out and see so many of you. And I don't know if any of you were able to get to one of the mappenings. I just thought it was really wonderful. I think Sanford is on, for example, who was at the very first one when we were in Bowling Green. And Ari said she was in Kent. So yes, it was. I was just gonna say it was a really wonderful opportunity to dig into the map, have some pizza, and be in community. And then, Mia, if you'll go on to the next slide. The other thing we talked about the last time we had coffee with Common Cause is we talked about the People's Watch. Um, as you know, with the map making, there were a series of different deadlines. And, when we got to the point when it was the Ohio Redistricting Commission's turn, it was just like, okay, we get it. You didn't think you're going to be able to get easily bipartisan maps in September. But when we got to October and we were still not actually seeing maps, we knew that, they were openly saying, hey, we're negotiating behind the scenes. We're in the process of negotiating. And you're like, well, wait a second. It is against, Ohio law, the Sunshine Law, to actually negotiate these things in private. These kind of negotiations are required to take place in public. And it was like, well, where are the maps? And so initially, Kathy Johnston, who is next to Sister Gemma on the right side, she is the person that is shorter person to the left. Anyway, so one of the things that she said is like, well, we could take signs and we could be out, outside where they're parking and I was like, they can take away our signs, right? They can take away our signs and they're on, yes, they're going to have to go back and forth to the parking garage, but wouldn't it be better just to haunt the State House? And because it was October, wonderful time to haunt the State House and walk around and talk to people and wear Where's the Map t-shirts. Did any of you participate in this? Because it was really fun. So if you were there, I'd love to have you speak up.
I was there and it was fun.
It was fun, wasn't it?
Most definitely, it was fun. I'm in the picture there smiling next to Kathy Johnston. It was just amazing to be with people who felt the same way and were there for a purpose. And we were telling the legislators, especially before the map finally came out, that this is wrong. This justice must be done. And the Reverend, what was his name that spoke? The fellow in the wheelchair stood up and spoke, the minister, he was fabulous.
I was so impressed. I was going to say there was the young pastor, so the pastor from Trinity Episcopal who spoke, and I just thought just that it almost was like a poem. It was a wonderful kind of reflection. We also did have a poet with us for a while, so I was going to say that also made me super happy. And then we have Deacon Nick, who had the purple binoculars on, who is with the Ohio Hunger Network. And here we have Jen Miller from the League of Women Voters with her binoculars looking around. We also handed out Halloween candy. Tricksters are no treat. Show us the map. And yes, we gave them to legislators and to lobbyists and just talking to folks about, well, hey, where is the map? We also did went to a house session where we stood up in the gallery with purple candles to match our purple shirts, and really wanted to make it very clear, not just to legislators, but anybody who was in the State House, including the press, just that it was genuinely problematic basically to do all their map making in private. And of course, that gets us, of course, to what actually happened. And so, Mia, do you want to take
Yeah,
over to tell us about
sure.
what it was like to actually go to those hearings?
Sure. So we asked them to show us the map, and unfortunately, they did show us the map. As Catherine mentioned, there are these three stages in the Constitution for drawing of the map. The first step was the responsibility of the legislature, and that was supposed to happen by September 30th, and it didn't. And the second stage was for the Ohio Redistricting Commission to draw a map. And that deadline was October 30th. And all of this activity went on towards the middle end of October, saying, "Where's the map?" And then they made a map and they had hearings on October 30th and 31st. This cartoon is actually old. It's from the 2021 redistricting. We all have been through this for a long time of them not listening. But here's a picture of us at the hearing on October 30th, asking them, where is the map? Um, and then they showed a map. Then they pitched up a map on the 30th and they passed it on the 31st. Now, one of the reasons that they did that is because if the redistricting commission had not passed a map and it had gone to the third stage or third opportunity, that would have gone back to the General Assembly. And if the map had been passed as a regular bill and signed into law by Governor DeWine as coming through the General Assembly, we would have had the opportunity to mount a referendum campaign against that map. And they did not want that to happen. So they they did all these negotiations in secret, as Catherine mentioned, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And they brought forward a map on the very last possible day, October 30th, because it's required to have two public hearings. So there we are. The map shows up. We've never seen it before. We know nothing about it. And it's supposed to be a public hearing for our input. But there's no way to have input on something you've never seen before. And then on the very next day, they passed it as a bipartisan map. It had to be bipartisan in order to pass through the redistricting commission. So the two Democrats on the Ohio Redistricting Commission did join in to approve that map. So there, I did not put this slide in here. That's Catherine's fault. But it is really frustrating because obviously when you debate a map in public, as we showed at the mappenings, you make it better. You make it better. A map that has been thoroughly vetted and kind of chewed up and spat out and thought through by the public is a better map. And Trevor Martin from the League of Women Voters was able to just bring some of the ideas that people had shared in Kent the night before to the hearing on the 31st. But no, they really weren't listening. And it's frustrating to have these almost identical cartoons from years apart, but they're still not listening. So
Well,
what
and
did
I keep thinking, Mia,
yeah,
like one of the things that killed me about the testimony too is when there was the sponsor, what you think of as a sponsor testimony. So is State Rep Brian Stewart, and he basically reads the Ohio Constitution.
right.
He doesn't explain the map. He does like the maps are not the kind of electronic maps like you could look at them and try to figure out what actually happened. They literally are these, PDFs and they're like, oh, they're online. We're like,
Yeah. Well, they weren't even online at the
yes.
beginning. So the idea that we had any meaningful opportunity to weigh in was absolutely ridiculous. Was anybody who was at the hearing want to, just chime in and say what it felt like to be there and have all these people who had written really good testimony and were talking to them sincerely, not as partisans, but as Ohioans looking for fairness. And then to have this process just, barrel ahead full steam and just roll us, steamroll everybody and have those maps pass. Anybody want to
Um,
jump in?
I would like to. My name's Gina. Um, and I drove up to Columbus purposely for that. It was the first time I was ever at a hearing. Um, so I went in thinking I would be just under the radar, but so many of you from different groups noticed me as a new person, introduced yourselves, wanted to know who I was. And again, it was like watching sausage being made. The ugliness of what you just said, that there was testimony that I learned information about. They learned information. But again, that cartoon, um, I felt that that's what was happening. That the wonderful testimony, whether it was from the League of Women Voters or actually the one time on Friday where there was actual, yes, I want to make a question or ask a question. Yet it was the auditor. He asked a question, but he was also answering his own question,
Mm-hmm.
not listening to the response about
Yeah.
saying that you want a 5-to-8 ratio, therefore we have to gerrymander every district. I was wanting to jump, I was jumping up and down on my seat because I'm a public school teacher and I have created an elective in my math department called Math That Matters. And the very first unit is about voting.
Mm-hmm.
How many people do not understand not all elections are majority. They don't know that it's plurality. And again, we do an M&M bag experiment, which is what he was talking about. If you have a 5-to-8 ratio of green to brown M&Ms in the entirety of the bag, if someone takes a handful, that does not mean you are going to have 5-to-8
Right.
ratio of green to brown. Yet he was just And it was again, if my high school kids or my eighth graders can understand that the entirety of Ohio can be represented, as a 5 to 8, does not mean that my district has to be 5 to 8.
Right.
Um, and so
And
once again, um, I came back fired up, and I'm getting more people to pay attention to the hearings, whether it's on, you know, the extension of the ballots or common sense gun laws or whatever. But it really made me realize so much more happens in Columbus
yeah,
that affects our
absolutely.
life than Washington, D.C. And
Absolutely.
thank you for everybody who I take our regulars there. That really made me feel like we've got good voices.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for going. That's really awesome. I mean, one thing you point out that is just kind of icky is how often when they do ask a question, they're trying to catch you out and they have a really nasty tendency, which I experienced the first time I gave testimony many years ago before I worked for Common Cause, where they will ask questions of people that they know are not um, are not like Catherine and Kelly and I. They don't do it for a living. They're just citizens coming to talk, and they'll ask a kind of trick question in order to try to trick them into saying, something that undermines their own argument or something. It's really, really gross. It's just icky, and I think that that's what Auditor Faber was trying to do with Janine. Luckily, she used to be head of the Consumer Council and, could give him a what for. Um, but, there is this kind of weird thing of trying to trick people out. Um, uh, and not really a genuine question. I mean, you could tell that they had the obviously the folks on the commission had made an agreement with each other not to ask any questions, and Faber was the only one who broke that for one question. One question. This is a map, a congressional map that is, clearly illegal, and clearly gerrymandered. Just look at it, and it's going to last for 6 years, and they're going to ask one question so that Auditor Faber can, spout something about his own views of misunderstanding, basically all of math. So it's discouraging. Just to be real quick about this, the map, we should be 8-7 if we were to be proportional to how Ohio votes, 55 percent Republican, 45 Democratic. We're currently 10-5. This moves us to 12-3, although a couple of those seats are toss-ups. And the way things are going, who knows, maybe all these seats will be toss-ups. I'm just kidding, but it does depend on what's happening in the world and who the candidates are, and all of those things. But yes, this was a worse gerrymander. The major differences were that look at District 1 down here. Cincinnati gets divided, so Greg Landsman's district becomes harder to win. Marcy Kaptur's district becomes harder to win, and Amelia Sykes' districts gets a little bit easier. And we can imagine the politics and the backroom negotiations, that went into those decisions. Also, Mike Carey, it doesn't show it on this chart, but Mike Carey's district also, District 15, became a little bit easier for him to hang on to. I think this is the
Before
slide
you
that
go any
really,
further, I noticed a kind of a question that, like,
yeah.
if you don't think about this all the time, I think
Mhm.
it's worth saying, okay, so like when we say, 55-45, we're looking at over a decade, over the last decade, how is it Ohioans voted on statewide elections?
Right.
So you're looking at like the whole state over a 10-year period, and 55% voted for Republicans. And so this would be like Senate or president, statewide offices. So 55% Republican, 45% Democrat. And so the way to think about that is then, of course, the map should reflect that. So when there was a question in the chat about, well, what does R plus 3 mean?
Right.
So the way to think about this is that the bigger that number, so if it's R plus 20, for example, it's very Republican. It is really it's really leaning Republican. Or if you see a D plus, Democrat plus 5, it means, there's a really good chance that that person will get 55% of the vote. So, Catherine was the one who asked the question. I like the name Catherine. And so, if you go back to the chart, that's the way to think about this. And so, when you look at this map, you can tell the places where it is really blue, a darker blue, that is a very Democratic district. And if it's a light blue, so for example, the 13th congressional district, that's Amelia Sykes district, it is leaning Democratic. Now, before this was really really a toss-up district, but now it is a more Democratic district. But if you look down in Hamilton County, the Congressional District 1 used to be a slightly Democratic district, and is now much more a toss-up and a little closer to, a light red, shall we
R
say, a
plus
pink.
five. I mean, from D plus three to R plus five. That's a pretty big
Yes.
change.
That's a pretty big change. And how can I put this? Even
So,
a few points make a difference. So you think about like Kevin Coughlin, who was running against Amelia Sykes in the 13th congressional district, so Republican running against Amelia Sykes. Her district changed by 3 points,
right.
and he dropped out.
And he
So
dropped
like
out.
it makes an enormous difference when it comes to how people think about this district, the money that is spent by the political parties in the district, and it's not a game. I think the reason I included that quote from Mia was that's the way they treated it. They
Right.
treated it like it was a game.
Dave, I want to answer Dave's question.
Go
So,
for it.
actually, Ohio was the only state in America where redrawing a map, specifically our congressional map, was required. And the reason for that was that when we redistricted in 21 and 22, the legislative map for Ohio House and Ohio Senate was struck down 7 times, but the very last time, both Democrats and Republicans agreed on it. So it was a bipartisan map that is going to last us through the end of the decade. The congressional map was never a bipartisan map, and so it was just passed through the General Assembly by a majority of Republicans without Democratic votes. And so in the Constitution, it says that if you don't have a bipartisan map, you're required to redistrict after 4 years. So we used the congressional map for 2 election cycles, and now we had to draw a new map. So unfortunately, that was something that was required in our Constitution. And then, everybody else jumped in. And I don't, not going to spend a lot more time on this, but just we always have to remember that drawing a fair map is easier than drawing a rigged map. Drawing a map to get what you want as opposed to what's fair is harder. So what we have 4 maps here that we're showing you. The current congressional map, the map drawn in 2022, and the new map, the 26 map, those are on the left. And then on the right are 2 maps that were submitted to the commission and also to the legislative committee that are better maps that we could have adopted, that we could have adjusted, that we could have discussed, that we could have debated. They were never brought up for discussion. And there are 5 different measures. All of the measures except splitting, the higher number is better. And just, not to belabor this, just to look at proportionality, the map we've used for the past 4 years has a proportionality score of 28. That means how close does it come to that 55-45 split that Ohioans, which is the way Ohioans vote in statewide elections. The current map had 28. The new map has a proportionality score of 13. 13.
Mhm.
And yet, if you try, you can make a map with 95 or 97% proportionality. So it's not impossible. Some of these things are the maps are all pretty similar, but on proportionality, just the current map is just way, way out of line. Um, and compactness also, it does not do well in compactness. So, and then there's a lot of discussion about, I mean, there's a lot of discussion about, well, the Democrats sold us out and this happened and that happened. From the perspective of Common Cause Ohio and also Fair Districts, which we're part of the coalition, the thing that matters is they didn't follow the Constitution. It wasn't a transparent process. They didn't have they didn't give us an opportunity to weigh in. They didn't give us an opportunity to make suggestions that would have made a better map. I appreciate, Gina, that you liked seeing the sausage being made, but we really wanted to see the sausage being made. We wanted to see them debating, well, should we put the line here or should we put the line here? And what happens if we put the line here? And this is going to divide this school district, but this is going to take out this incumbent. Well, this is going to add more Republicans, or if this person runs, they won't be in the district that they've run in before, and all of those things. And we don't want to be deprived of that process. We're not asking for a favor, we're asking them to obey the law. Now, it's a separate question entirely and really not our lane, but a lot of people are distressed at, well, the Democrats shouldn't have done that, or, did they end up doing something that was bad or good? And that is a separate question. But, we do know that they were threatened with a worse map. We do know they had to take into consideration the fact that all the times that the maps were struck down in the past, that's not going to happen again because we have a different Ohio Supreme Court. So the option of bringing this to court is not a realistic and happy one the way that it was in the past. They also had to realize that doing a referendum, even though we were ready to do a referendum, would have been tricky for a variety of reasons. One of which was the law that they passed in 2024 in order to harm the Citizens Not Politicians effort, which said that you had to check the citizenship of everybody who donated to the campaign, which is for various complicated reasons, would just make it hard for organizations to join in the effort because they don't know the citizen. Somebody might be married to someone with a green card and have a shared bank account. So that would have made it difficult, and we would have had to have collected signatures in 90 days during the middle of the winter. And Frank LaRose and Dave Yost and all those folks could have done their tricks in terms of cutting time into that 90 days to make it shorter by not certifying the summary language, et cetera. So, many, many things went into that decision. There's a lot of folks who think that they actually came out with a much better map than they would have had if they had fought. Again, not our problem, not our discussion. We still want to see the sausage made. We want to see our politicians fighting for us and fighting for the process and for the legitimacy of the process. But we do have some links there if you want to read a little bit more about some of these things. And with that, I haven't been checking the chat. Any thing we
So
need
I
to?
was going to say, so Michael, it's really hard that we can't referendum the map. I mean, it
Yeah.
is like, yes, collecting signatures in January sounds horrible, but it also is just, it was really hard, and it's also really hard that members of both political parties decided to engage in secret negotiations and violate the Ohio Constitution. That's just hard to take. I do think, some of this stuff is interesting. I also think it's worth remembering, that the Ohio Supreme Court has changed, that it is not, it is not the same court. The Chief Justice, for example, is somebody who voted in favor of the gerrymandered maps when they had, when they were presented in 2021 and 2022. So the court is really different. We also know that when it comes to federal courts, we can appeal about racial gerrymandering, but they basically said, in Rucho v. Cause, basically they said, hey, that it's non-justiciable, which I think is one, a hard word to say, and two, is not necessarily easily digested, but they basically said that the federal courts had no role in partisan gerrymandering, that it was a political question and it should be up to the states.
So when
So,
we look at going forwards, because that is what we really do care about, because one thing is for sure, even though we're in this incredible bind, I don't think any of us are ready to say, oh, fine, just go ahead, gerrymander. We don't care. We do. We care. We care immensely. And we've been fighting this for a long time. And but it's also true that the people who want to gerrymander, they know that we care and they want to stop us by any means. And one way that they can stop us is by undercutting our ability to bring issues to the ballot. That we refer that to that as direct democracy. Ohio is one of 24 states that can bring issues directly to voters, can go around the legislature. We can collect signatures and put something on the ballot and have voters vote on it directly. It's hard. It's really hard. It's really expensive. It's really time consuming. It's basically almost impossible, but we still can do it. And that's why they're trying to take away our ability to do that. So right now, our goal right now is to protect our ability to bring things to the ballot. So when they bring up bills like SB 153, which, thank goodness did not pass yesterday, but probably is going to come back in some form next year. It was a voting bill, but it had tacked into it a whole bunch of things to make collecting signatures much, much, much more difficult. And so we are going to be on the lookout for that to make sure that we fight as a coalition that cares about gerrymandering, that as an organization and as a part of a coalition that cares about gerrymandering, that we mobilize everybody to protect our right to bring issues directly to voters through direct democracy. Another thing that we need to think about is what's happening across the country, because this attack on direct democracy is not just happening in Ohio, it's happening all over the country. And there is a link here, and I know that it's on the list of links that we've been dropping in the chat, that looks at attacks on direct democracy all over the country in those 24 states that have that ability. It's under attack in all of those states. So, you know, that is something we need to think about and learn from each other, learn tactics from each other as to how to protect that right. And finally, we need to deal with gerrymandering on a national level. There have been efforts before to pass legislation that would attempt to ban gerrymandering across the country. So we don't need to fight it in Ohio and in Illinois and in Michigan and in each separate place. We just have a national law that bans gerrymandering. So that is something that we will keep you informed about, and we care about. And we have to keep our anger and our righteous indignation. And I have one of those terminate gerrymandering shirts. So I am definitely also going to put a piece of masking tape on it that says, we'll be back, because we will. We're going to be back. I've got all those clipboards in my basement ready to go. Um, and yes, um, I think we should carry on. Catherine, are we ready to move on?
yeah, I think so. The one thing that, that I thought that was worth mentioning had to do with racial gerrymandering is still something that is decided by federal courts. And so you'll notice what happened with Texas. And so that part is actually that part of the national drama is kind of interesting. And as you're thinking about gerrymandering, it's important to remember There's the partisan gerrymandering and the racial gerrymandering as you're following all this national stuff. And then on to the next thing.
I am up. We will do a quick recap of our election. We just want to say thank you to everyone who shared resources, who got out and helped poll monitor for the election that is actually still happening. We're still in the midst of the boards of elections certifying the election. So we had folks in over 13 counties and lots of poll monitors out there and lots of other incidental reports as knowledgeable folks were doing their best to let us know what was going on. So we had a rapid response team that was ready in different ways to make calls and suss out issues. So it was great. We, had lots of reports that come into the hotline. We were able to have some experts. There was a machine expert with verified voting working with us that could get in touch with boards of elections and follow up on some issues. And so we thank you and all of the peacekeepers that were on standby for your help. Next slide. Trying to get to the 293 that everyone cares about. So we also found interesting, these are some examples of just some interesting issues that happened during that day. Early in the morning in Summit County, the e-poll books didn't have the signatures loaded. Folks were showing up and not able to verify their signature. That was a situation that got rectified quickly through the Board of Elections. We had a Pickerington school board candidate who was missing from 3 precincts and the ballots in 3 precincts in Franklin County because of a miscommunication with Fairfield. That was unfortunate. They had to rush out mailed ballots, but Franklin County did take care of that quickly. Thankfully, that candidate still was able to be elected. He was one of the top 3 candidates. So that ended okay. Butler County was an interesting one. That Board of Election actually allowed someone to work as a poll worker in a precinct that he was running for office. So that was very strange. He wasn't campaigning, he didn't have gear on, and that had been his traditional polling location to work, but still strange. So someone noticed that and flagged that and was able to get that taken care of. We did see a lot of increased provisionals in different places, some technology issues. All in all, the boards, quickly respond and have plans in place and emergency procedures in place. So overall, it was a good day. We did have, unfortunately, a Secretary of State candidate running next year who was sharing machine misinformation online. That was unfortunate. We also saw an incident of a poll worker jokingly threatening to call ICE on someone, which we know the intimidation is a problem and a threat that we need to work on this coming year. So some unfortunate issues. Hopefully everyone got the support they needed, but we thank you and everyone else who helped with that. Yes, so Secretary of State who is dishonest. Go figure. So here we go. So Senate Bill 293, I know many of you have received probably multiple action alerts over the past couple of weeks. This thing flew through the State House almost in a nauseating way, right? This bill, 293, was originally introduced just a month ago on the Senate side to eliminate the 4-day window of mailed ballots being accepted that had been postmarked prior to the end of election day. And so total knee-jerk reaction. We're not the only state that's seeing it, but Ohio was one of the states that does have that window after an election. And that became too much for some folks to not do anything about. And with threat from the Trump administration to sue for consistency across states, which, would question the legality of that to begin with, they rushed this through in the Senate. It flew through hearings in the Senate, was voted out of committee, passed out of the Senate. It appeared amended. Senate Bill 293 appeared Tuesday. So it was just Tuesday where it added 60 pages of some of the guts of Senate Bill 153. So that was the big citizenship bill with the drop boxes and some petition and direct democracy attacks. They took out the procedural citizenship registration vetting, how to challenge someone at the polls, and some of the very nuanced procedural stuff, threw it into Senate Bill 293. Secretary LaRose showed up and testified. Secretary LaRose showed up and testified, and then got voted out of committee on this first hearing. So seemed bizarre to me, but like I was glad to see it was bizarre to Catherine too, who's been in it a lot longer. And it was just amazing. So another brick wall in that committee. More than eight. I think we can go to the next slide. Oh, actually, can we go back, Mia? Sorry. It was interesting to point out in Secretary LaRose's testimony that he mentions verbally that there's like a 1 in a million chance of voter fraud. And I was surprised he said that in the same context of his testimony saying that, oh, this change isn't disruptive. Fewer than 8,000 ballots were returned after Election Day during this window, as if these 8,000 people just didn't matter. So it was very frustrating. Went through the committee that same day, which was Tuesday, and yesterday it was voted out of both the House and the Senate. So it is now the Senate had a concurrent bill, had a concurrent vote on that bill. So it rushed out of both chambers in record speed, and it will now be sent to the governor for signing. So, it was unethical, it was very strange. They broke even their own rules, which were already bad to begin with. There wasn't election official input. Election officials were caught off guard with this, and are still certifying an election. Includes no additional funding, no voter education, we'll put the link. But the hearing Tuesday. I want to first thank everybody. If any of you had submitted testimony, I know so many of you made calls and emails. More than 80 people submitted testimony at the last minute. So we find out these things on a late Friday night. We have to rush out an alert on the weekend, and you all responded. There was one proponent testimony, and that was LaRose. Committee members didn't even find out about this bill until 4 hours before the committee. So they were trying to read through it and sort through it and try and, intelligently talk about it. And ironically, the boards of elections will still process military and overseas ballots during the same time period. And so the boards of elections are still going to be doing the same work. They're going to be taking in mailed ballots. They're going to be looking through them and sorting them. But unfortunately, they're going to be setting aside just thousands of them. We know over 9,500 in last November, more than 7,000 this year in this November that happened to come in during that window because of the mail. So there's testimony from Mia that you can look at. There's also charts of ballots by county that had been received to those windows in the last couple election cycles. Our updated action as of this morning, I think Mia had sent around 8:15 this morning, is now it's time to tell Governor DeWine to veto it. We have a short window, so once it gets to Governor DeWine, we have 10 days for him to ponder and sign or not sign. And so we have an action alert for folks to email the governor's office. We're going to ramp up to calls, in the next couple days. But we want to point out we want to remind Governor DeWine that back when House Bill 458 happened, he said, okay, with these changes of 458, we're good. We don't need any more election law changes during his tenure. And unfortunately, we have received just almost every 6 months some procedural nuanced data change consolidating Secretary LaRose's power. Unfortunately, a lot of them are behind the scenes, but we need to tell Governor DeWine as much as we can and as loud as we can that this is just unbelievable, irresponsible, unnecessary, and just bad for every Ohio voter. And that we'll also include some social media graphics if you post a lot online or have networks, friends, family you can share with. That'll be in the follow-up also. Thanks, Mia. Next slide. Okay, so as we talk about 293 and how this happened, we really need to consider the Secretary of State's office now as like a real threat. Using a state office like the Secretary of State as like an institutionalized anti-voter tool is a new form of voter suppression in Ohio. Traditionally our list maintenance was decentralized, so every county maintained its own voter registration rolls. And recent changes with the Data Act started with 458 and now some pending in 293, are really backdoor attacks. So things like the Secretary of State now warehouses all the data. It will bottleneck at his office the citizenship verification checks. He also, in the same breath of saying, voter fraud is so rare, champions now the federal ability to use the SAVE database, which is the systematic Alien Verification and Entitlements Act, which was designed to help folks who became citizens know what benefits are available to them. So it was designed as a tool to support new citizens. Instead, it's now being weaponized for their narrative of sussing out what they consider problems. And so just created really aggressive role maintenance procedures that the boards of elections aren't liking, and we know are harming voters. At 10/28, which seems like a lifetime ago, so October 28th, he actually sent 1,200 cases of cold cases to the Department of Justice, where he said, hey, you can look into these as federal election crimes, because our county prosecutors, whose role it is to review these voter issues, passed on them, didn't take them up in their counties. And so, he's like court shopping around for ways to make sure that people know that he's doing, his job. And a very frustrating process. And, there are a lot of unfortunate people that are being stuck in the middle of this. But rush directives, constant changes, frustrating election officials, confusing poll workers. We had a poll worker debrief after the election, and it was interesting to hear the training that the poll workers get, but there's been so many changes that we're not sure. Some of them aren't sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, or have to stop and have questions. And there's new people running the precincts, and so it's a very comprehensive and strategic plan to create confusion and problems for voters in general. And lastly, I'll say that, with the Public Integrity Division and the Election Integrity Unit, he has outwardly asked for public referrals for suspected voter fraud and any problems that, the public is seeing at the polls. So there's an intense pressure for prosecuting and scaring people and intimidating people when it comes to registering to vote and vote. So on that happy note, and with pending 293, there are lawsuits swirling around in different different parts of the country around this 4-day window, but leave it to Ohio to preemptively change its law before any of that is sorted out. There may be a case, there'll be a case that will be heard at the Supreme Court in probably mid next year. But yeah, Ohio's right on top of it. So with all of what is happening at the Secretary of State's level, Mia, next slide. We do have an action alert. This is a national action alert that we will include in our resources, where you can submit public comments by December 1st to the Department of Homeland Security, telling them that this overhaul of the SAVE database is attacking the privacy of, just every American, and the right to vote. This was back in the early Doge days, and they were like, oh, we're going to consolidate all this information. They're pulling in Social Security. They were threatening to sue states and have sued some states to get this voter registration data. And because of a class action lawsuit from some Democrat advocates, they decided to retroactively open up public comment. So there is now public comment that we all need to take advantage of, and it's very simple. Just to be on file, you can do it anonymously, so you don't have to identify an email or anything like that. So you're not on a list, but you can give your opinion of, as a voter, as a citizen, as an American, of what you think is problematic with this overhaul of the system and weaponizing of the system, if you would like. We encourage you. We also have more information you can read, because we understand, some of you like to do a deep dive and understand where it's coming from, but we appreciate all of the comments and all of the calls, and we know you will all be making calls this week, and we're very grateful that you all use your voices so prolifically and wonderfully to voice your concerns. Thanks. I don't think I have anything else. Okay.
We have so much that's going on. It's always a bit of an avalanche.
Well, and I'm on the utilities section, which a lot of times I know is the section that you're like, okay, I care about this, and there's all of this corruption, but utility issues can get super complicated. But we have some very interesting news. Yesterday, the Public Utilities Commission ordered First Energy to pay $250 million in penalties and to issue customers refunds. So this is very big news. This happened yesterday. Now, you will remember that the Consumer Council asked for half a million. So this is not, this is not 500 million. This is 250 million. But the Consumer Council did say, hey, this is something, this is actually, this is not nothing. This is holding them accountable. I'm sure they were disappointed that it wasn't even larger, but this is a significant penalty for First Energy. And they will feel $250 million. Now, I'm gonna just do a real quick recap of House Bill 6 just to remind you because we're going to be talking about the First Energy executive. So I just wanted to kind of lay the ground because it's been a few years. So in December of 2018, basically the First Energy executives were thinking, well, what can we do so that we can actually get somebody good on the Public Utilities Commission? So the person that they wanted was a guy named Sam Randazzo. Many of you will remember that because of this scandal, Sam died as a result of suicide. But what's important is that these two executives, one's a guy named Chuck Jones, the other is Mike Dowling. They are, in fact, beginning in January, they have a trial about their role in House Bill 6. Because, of course, First Energy's, was found guilty and did their deferred prosecution. But the actual people who made the decisions are going to be going on trial in 2026. What I think is interesting is, the indictment. Basically, they had this conversation with Mike DeWine and John Husted, and you remember he's now a U.S. senator. And then they just basically drove essentially a mile to the German village condo of Sam Randazzo to basically decide and negotiate about how much he should be paid before he gets appointed just a few months later by Governor DeWine. So that's the background. Mia, if you'll go to the next slide. So at a pretrial hearing at the end of October, there were basically the defense, the defendant's attorney, so you're talking about Chuck Jones and Mike Dowling, they argued that the Ohio Consumer Counsel, whose name is Maureen Willis, that she should not get to testify. They also argued some other things, and have pushed back on having information from the householder trial included. They want Attorney General Dave Yost actually to be taken out of, basically removed from any of the proceedings, and be given no role. Yost did attend this pretrial hearing. He did not speak during it, just listening to like what was going on. Afterwards, he told Signal Ohio, he said, this is the biggest corruption case we've ever seen. And so clearly stating what we all think, but it's interesting, we do have this like householder timeline. So if you're interested in kind of digging into all of the details, I highly encourage you to check that out. And then I also on November 6th, the Ohio Elections Commission held a hearing, and this is important to know. So today we should find out what their ruling is. Essentially, the Elections Commission charges are very similar to the federal charges, but there is one that is just state related, and it involves Larry Householder illegally using $900,000 of his campaign money to pay for his legal costs, meaning to pay to defend him. So don't know yet. Our Secretary of State was outraged that the Ohio Election Commission was going to take a little bit more time, but we should know later today how they come down on the cases that are in front of them. So that stay tuned on that. And then me, if you're willing to go the next. Oh, the other thing I wanted to tell you about is this new report. Just encourage you to check it out. I think what's important about this is that First Energy has done things over the years that are really problematic. And yes, they were just got penalized, but they're seeking approval for a $90 million annual rate, which would include their accounting error. And their accounting error is they used money they were not supposed to use to lobby. So that when it comes to lobbying and a lot of the activities they did with House Bill 6, um, at minimum, it should be coming from shareholder money. It should not be coming from ratepayer money. It should not be coming from us because it doesn't benefit us to be lobbied, to lobby the PUCO, to lobby the public to support the raise. That should not be, that's actually a violation. And so, the Security and Exchange Commission, basically First Energy said, hey, it accepted the findings of their audit, but they hope they wouldn't have to shoulder it. So stay tuned on that one because, of course, that's before the Public Utilities Commission. I also wanted to highlight this one, which is American Electric Power, which is also, American Electric Power managed to fly under the radar when it came to House Bill 6. You will remember in January, the SEC announced that AEP had agreed to pay $19 million because of their dark money payments and their lying to investors. So, once we got to June, they managed to hike their rates. So anybody who's in AEP territory is aware that they've hiked their rates. At the end of October, it came out that they basically are making a lot of money. They're reining in the money, and they have now asked for additional rate hike, which will cost $50 per customer. So think of that, $50 per customer, and you can just imagine with all of the inflation what that means for people. None of us would want, none of us want an additional $50, but just imagine, what is like for people who are really living paycheck to paycheck and just are faced all the challenges of inflation. I did want to highlight this. So our friends from Stand Up Columbus are organizing people to go to the public hearings. And so I just wanted to highlight that there are public hearings. When we do a follow-up, we'll send all the hearing information. I, highly encourage you to attend. This is another opportunity to go and to stick up for ratepayers. But it's also okay just to go see what it's like. And a good example, if you are a Columbus person, you could go to the one that's on the 4th, just see how this whole thing works. And then on the 9th, you could testify actually at the Public Utilities Commission. And then on to the next. I did want to give you a little bit of good news. So, one of the things that happened yesterday was House Bill 303 was passed out of the House. So, it hasn't passed the whole way through, but out of the House. Now, what is exciting about that is that it provides well, they're calling it a pilot program, but it would allow a community to actually develop a facility. So, it will be a community-centered energy facility. So, of course, it could be solar, it could be biomass, it could be natural gas, it could be a variety of different things, but it is a way for communities to actually build power. And I think it's important to realize that we are, as the state of Ohio, we are a large consumer of electricity, but we rank 8th in electricity production. I think it's easy to see why. House Bill 6, it didn't just give away ratepayer money to First Energy and basically the aging coal plants and just it also removed renewable standards. So we're behind the curve because we don't have renewable standards. So this is actually a really good change. And now I went
Oh
through
my.
these lickety split.
Yes. And there was a question, are the PUCO hearings broadcast online? I don't think they are, but I'm not sure.
So what is interesting is that they have not been, so they're not like, for example, on the Ohio Channel, but they're not in the traditional sense, the Ohio Channel. They sometimes do them on YouTube. And so like one of the things that we can all do is actually, contact the PUCO. Not all of them, but will be put on YouTube. So like I would highly encourage, any of these that we can actually see from a distance also gives us a sense, oh, well, what this is like. Also, you can send letters to the Public Utilities Commission. That testifying in person, I think, is important, but it's also important if you want to send a letter. If you have questions, I care a lot about these things, but I'm not a utility expert. What we'll do is we'll include in the follow-up the Ohio Consumer Council's email and phone number, and you can actually touch base with them. Also, I was going to say Janine, who sometimes attends these, is another utility expert. And so if you have questions and you're not getting your questions answered quickly with the Ohio Consumer Council, send me an email. Kelly will pop that into the chat right now. Send me an email and I will see that I get the answers for you as soon as I can.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And we have gone a little bit over time, but and we are kind of ending with that happy news about that bill passing. But I did want to, we're in a really, really difficult time period, whether we're looking at what's happening in Ohio or what's happening in the US or on some level what's happening all around the world. There's a lot going on and it can really be overwhelming. I know I feel overwhelmed, days like when you go to these hearings and they just aren't listening, et cetera. So we wanted to find something to kind of uplift and give you a kind of a hopeful something to end this with. And there's a group of individuals who came together and they actually saw this online somewhere else. So they didn't have the first idea, but they curated 20 signs that have information about what is actually fascism. And one sign that says signs of fascism and the other says our grandparents fought fascism, will you? And they've been going to all over central Ohio. And what they do is they kind of go in a long line along a road silently, holding the sign far enough apart so that cars going by can read each one separately. And they've posted videos online of what they've been doing. It's called the Signs of Fascism. And it's incredible how much of a response these have been getting, not only from in America, but actually around the world. And I just wanted to share, a couple of comments that came off of an Instagram post about this. Here is someone in Germany. Honestly, I am a German watching this in Germany, but I cannot express how proud I am of these people. This is just brilliant and a sign that all is not lost. Keep fighting. Sorry. Woo! Um, so, you know, this is just individuals coming together and taking a stand. They know that they're not going to end everything bad that's happening in America by holding up those signs, but they're still doing it. And they are making a difference. And there's some links in the document that we sent or in the follow-up that, if you're interested in this, if you'd like to borrow the signs, if you want to get involved, we can help you out. There's a really cool little 47-second video that intersperses a sign and something that's happening in America right now, just to show how real this threat is. And then I wanted to end with this quote. Someone said, "Dark times, America, you're beating back fascism. These should be joyous times. You're winning a fight in mere months that other countries have taken decades to win." Well, we'll see about that, but it is worth being hopeful and being together. And then we just wanted, of course, to give you a little heads up of a few things that are coming. We are not going to have a coffee with Common Cause next month. Because it's a little bit too close to the holidays. But we thought for folks who are in the area, we would have a little happy hour at Tip Top Kitchen and Cocktails, 4:30 to 6 on the 15th. So That's right near the State House, so we can say, "Hey guys, we're here too." Um, so in case you are around or you can join us, we would love to see you. And we apologize that we can't be in all the different places, but for those that are within shouting distance, we would love to see you. We'll have a coffee with Common Cause in January. And there are ongoing Tuesday and Thursday call phone bank things that Common Cause National does. And with that, we're a couple of minutes over, but we really appreciate everybody hanging out with us
Mhm.
and caring about these things and following them and keeping on going and showing up as it says here. Thank you for always showing up and using your voice. We really appreciate it.
Well, and I have to say how grateful I am for everybody. And I just think there's a lot going on, a lot of ways to make a difference. So I encourage all of us, even though we are in trying times, find some way to give back, to do things in community. It's a really good time of year, to get out there, find a way to connect meaningfully. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And as Bill says, it's nice to be together online too.
That's
So I
right.
hope you can join us at Tip Top. Mia likes their fries that you like there, aren't there, Mia?
Sweet potato fries to
Sweet
die
potato
for. Yeah.
fries. Okay, so please consider joining us. I think it'll be really fun.
We just doubled the number of people that are going to show up by mentioning the sweet potato fries. So, thank you guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Call DeWine or
That's
email
right. Get
him.
on that right now. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.